Hello everybody and welcome back to another Backyard Baseball video. Now today's video is going to be an update or a follow-up to one of the videos I did a bit ago, I think like a month or two ago, of a Backyard Baseball tier list. Now this time, I'm not actually ranking the characters differently, or on different metrics. I'm ranking it on the characters in Backyard Baseball 2001 and 2003. Cause, as you guys may know, the characters in Backyard Baseball 2001 and 2003 are different than they are in 1997. Well, they aren't different themselves, the stats are different. Like, they massively nerfed arm strength so that weaker kids have weaker arms, but stronger kids still have their strong arms. They made it so that contact barely means anything. They made it so that height means a lot less in this version, although it's still a bit important. So there's quite a few things that are different in this version. So essentially, quite a lot of the characters got indirect buffs or direct buffs. If you look at some of them, their internal stats when you compare. Well, some others just didn't change or got nerfs. Although I don't think anybody got any direct nerfs. Most of it was indirect. I feel like this is enough of a difference to make an entire new tier list for Backyard Baseball 2001 and 2003. Because I feel like for this version, I just think it's different enough to warrant it. Oh, and by the way, if you see the tier list here, I'm not ranking the pros. Just to let you guys know. I'm still doing the same 30 Backyard Kids. Although if you guys want it, I could do a pro tier list. But regardless, I think I'll have to start here with Achmed Khan. Now, Achmed got, I'm pretty sure, yeah, he got a bit of a nerf in between the versions, because his arm was greatly nerfed and his contact it doesn't mean as much, but he still got power and he still got decent speed. He's probably gonna go at like the bottom of A tier, honestly. The arm is just kind of balances him out in this version. So I don't think he's definitely not as good, because in the 97 version I'd say he's the top of A tier. But in this version with the arm, although he's definitely really good, he definitely received a big nerf. Next up we got no, not Jeter. Next up, or A-Rod. Next up we got Amir, his little bro. He definitely got nerfs when it comes to this game. I'd argue that he's even worse than what he was in 97. He's definitely gonna go in like the low D tier. Just that arm and yeah, he does have good pop and he can be a good pitcher if you just supply him with juice boxes. That arm and that mediocre speed and that bad glove, although he's slightly helped with that, is just no. Nah, Amir. I'd argue that he's slightly worse in this version, but there's some characters that got nerfed even harder that I'd argue are even worse. Next up, we got Angela Delvecchio, who she's kinda. I'm just putting her there as a placeholder, but she's kinda weird in that she got both a nerf and a buff in this game when you compare her to 97. Her contact was nerfed. Well, the stat was nerfed, which means that she can hit bombs more easily, but my god, her fielding in this game. Like, you thought it was bad in 97? Check Angelo Delvecchio in 2001 and 2003 out. So, like, jeez. I think I'll still, because of the batting buff and because of her pitching, I'll still put her in low C like I did last time, or low mid tier like I did last time. But she's not as good as some tier lists say she is, and I said this for the '97 version as well. I think. Like, I just don't understand how people could put her above, I don't know, maybe like B. I just don't get it, honestly. She'd be a dishonorable mention for a bottom list for Backyard Kids, honestly. Next up, we got Annie Frazier, another character who was hugely impacted and nerfed by the update. The updates between 97 and 2001. She was, by the way, I probably shouldn't rank these guys mostly based off of how they were nerfed or upgraded, but I think I'll just list the player, but her her contact doesn't really mean anything in this game. Like, she was in like low B last time, but she's definitely taken down to like maybe like a mid C, like just barely above Angela, if you ask me. She does have some speed, so the contact isn't at so bad, cause it is slightly easier to get good hits with her, but it was just a major nerf. The Webber sisters, just same place as no. There we go. The Webber sisters, slight nerf in contact, but they got buff with their decent arms. So I'd say that they sit roughly around there. Yes, I'd argue that they're better than Amir, by the way. Correction, I'd argue that them apart is better than Amir, honestly. Although I respect the opinions of anyone who disagrees. Next up, we got Billa Jane Blackwood. And my god, if you thought she stunk in 97, yeah. I don't even think I need to explain that one. Like, she's definitely not, I don't think she's the worst because she does have some height and a decent arm, but my lord, if you thought she was bad in 97, then yeah, I got a treat for you here. Dante. I'd argue that the low contact, he's definitely even better in this version. That's all I'll say. He actually has a decent arm, and his contact doesn't really mean anything in this version. Just done deal, if you ask me. Will I? He does have the speed and the arm and the better pitching and the stamina and pitching. Although you aren't gonna use him as a pitcher. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. Sorry to slander any Achmed Khan fans, but I think just the pitching and no, the better fielding and the speed. I think that gives him the edge over Achmed, and also the slightly better pitcher. Because Dante really isn't an awful relief pitcher. If you don't have anyone better, although his speed is much better on the base paths. So I'll honestly say that just the speed and the arm just makes Dante slightly better than Achmed, just like a teeny bit. Although Achmed's bat is definitely a key component to him, and I can see why some people would rather have the bat than Dante's better arm, slightly better pitching and speed. But if you ask me, I just think he's slightly better. Dimitri Petrovich. He's still just about as solid as in 97. I think, yeah, he definitely he still has his good power bat. His arm isn't awful, although his speed is mediocre. I definitely think that this is a good position for him, for Dimitri, honestly. I think roughly just the same as when he was in 97. Just good, but not amazing. Okay. Ernie Steele. Do I think he's better than Annie? Uh, mm, I think Ernie is like potentially the most average player, or maybe Annie could take that, but I think he's like the most average player. Like, he has a gold tier glove and decent power, not too bad contact, and is even a good pitcher, but that speed and arm, man. Hmm. You see, I don't. By the way, in case you didn't. Oh, by the way, I'm sure you probably didn't. You probably already noticed this because I haven't mentioned it, but this is without the stat boosts and stat reductions. So Ernie's home field and the Webber sisters boosts and Angel against Tony, Achmed, whatever it is, isn't being taken accounted for. But I'd argue that Ernie is honestly, I'd definitely say that he's a bit better than he was in '97, but I'd argue that he's. You see, it's questionable if I want a slightly better arm or Ernie's in speed or a glove and pitching. I think I'll leave it up to the end of the video, but I might place Annie above Ernie, but it's honestly a debate with myself already. Understout, just the worst player in the game. I give him the slight edge over, or her, Gretchen Hasselhoff, the slight edge over Reese in this game. No, not this game, in the 97. God, I can't speak today. But in the 97 version, but in this game, just that one arm, and she's kind of poor at everything else except for maybe pitching. Just god awful. At least when in comparison to a good lot of the backyard kids. Because there's definitely a lot of generics that I'd rather have than her, but she's definitely not good. And definitely one of the worst backyard kids, if not the worst. I think she is the worst backyard kid for this version. Next up, we got Jocinda. Once again, heavily hit by that nerf. Contact nerf. Probably the most nerfed to the ground player in the entire game. She's essentially, her entire purpose, that contact bat, was pretty much blown away in this version. Like, she still has a decent arm, and the contact isn't entirely useless, because it isn't entirely removed. It does still help the players that have good of it, but my word, it just means so much less in this version than on 97. Would I rather have Angela than her, though? Nah, I'd still prefer the height. Would I rather have her than Annie? Nah, I think the speed and Annie having about the same bat. But but she was definitely nerfed to the ground, Jocinda. She, in the 97 version, she was like low A tier, if you ask me, but in this version, she's like mid C. If we're comparing lists, or my personal lists. By the way, I respect anybody that disagrees with my lists. Next up, we got Jorge. No, not Jeremy Burnett. Jorge Garcia. Just solid in this game. Jorge got a pretty massive buff in this game. He used to be like pretty awful or poor in the 97 version. Like, not the worst character, but definitely one of the worst. But Jorge got, on top of having his arm strength actually means something more, because he has a 97 out of 100 arm strength, yet you couldn't really see it that much in the 97 version. He has a surprisingly good arm, but now in this version you can actually see it, because he has pretty strong throws usually. But in this version, he got a major batting buff. He went from 31 out of 100 power plus 56 or 57 out of 100 contact to 81 out of 100 power, which is honestly pretty big for Jorge. He's honestly one of the more reliable power hitters now in the game in 2001 and 2003. I think that just his, and on top of that, since he's tall, he can catch up most stuff. And since he has a good arm and decent stamina, but honestly, I'm almost putting him in A. If he was slightly faster, then he'd easily be A. But I think I'll just put him at like the top of B now. He went from really poor to being really solid. So, yeah. I'm honestly glad, because Jorge was one of my favorite characters in the game. So I'm honestly glad to see his buff. And that you can hear the piano music or elegant music of his playing more often, considering he's now a power hitter. So, in these versions. So, good job on Jorge, or for Jorge. Next up, we got Kenny Kawaguchi. Kenny is all I can say. Oh, what happened to you, Kenny? Well, I know what happened to you. He based his weak-ish arm was exposed, and his contact, which is like the one thing he had going for him somewhat in his bat, were basically removed. All he had, I mean, he's still a decent pitcher and doesn't have the worst glove, but he's easily very poor now. Or like a late round pick. Fun fact, he actually gets buffed with Ichiro on the team, although I'm not taking it into consideration here. If you have Ichiro and you like Backyard Kids, then I'd actually argue that he's a great option, Kenny. Because in 2003, him and Ichiro give each other a buff. Or no, Ichiro buffs Kenny, and Kenny actually gets good speed, which is nice for him. But without it, and even if I was taking it into consideration, he's still just poor, Kenny. Would I rather him than Amir? Slightly better arm, better stamina. And I can just throw the slow ball for pitching. Yeah, I think I would rather Kenny, honestly. Next, okay, but wait, hold on. Would I rather him or Sidney though, or the Webber sisters though? Well, I don't know, honestly. Okay, because better pitcher, but worse at everything else. Yeah, I think I'd still rather have one of the Webber sisters without each other, honestly, than Kenny. Just the better arm and the better batting, even if he does have slightly better pitching. Next up, we got Big Kiesha, even better than before now. Easy S tier, she was elite in 97, and she's still elite here. Kiesha has basically all of the buffs and none of the nerfs. Because, I mean, like, her power and her contact, She already had both of them good, so doesn't really matter. Her arm, she still has her very strong arm. She still has her speed, and her pitching doesn't really mean that much because you're never going to put her at pitcher. But this is definitely going to be a pick of just S tier. Like, I don't think there's any reason to not have her in S tier, if you ask me. Next up, we got Kimmy Eckman. Probably most people's number one pick for the worst character in the game just based off of her card stats. But I'll actually defend Kimmy here in that she isn't if you can play with her and use her good with her swing, she actually has surprising pop in her bat. And she actually also has a good arm. Even if she can't catch, is bad at pitching and is slow, I think that her somewhat powerful bat and her good arm actually make her not too awful in this game, honestly. She got buffed being in between the versions because now her arm means more, and now she has she has better power now because used to she only had like a 40 out of 100 contact stat, but now that doesn't matter as much. So Kimmy, I'd definitely argue, but would I rather her than Amir though? Okay, it's better pitching, but like the same power, but better arm. Would I rather have that arm in Kimmy? No. I was hyping Kimmy up, but actually now thinking about it, I'm not sure if I would rather have her or Amir. Oh crap! I can't decide. And I was hyping her up that she wasn't that bad or that she got upgrades from 97, and yet I might just have to put her in the same place because I think I'd slightly rather have a mirror, and yet crap. Although Kimmy is definitely not one of the worst backyard kids, or if she is, she's not a bottom five. Might be like an dishonorable mention, but she's like maybe a bottom five backer kid, but she's just not one of the worst, unlike her stats would say. Next up, we got Lisa Crocket, a character who got buffed in this version, even though she was already really good in '97. She's going in the same place, low A tier, if you ask me. Lisa is essentially one of the best overall characters. She's got a good arm, decent bat power, good speed. I'd argue she's the best pitcher in the game, which I'll get to in a minute. She's, as I said, the pitching, decent speed. Like, she's got almost all of it. And in this version, the contact doesn't even hold her back any. She's definitely just extremely solid in this version. She's just she's just good. If I was assembling it, I'd argue that she'd be for the best possible team. If you wanted a stacked team on every position and just placing her on the mound. Like, she's honestly probably the most underrated character, and her stats are honestly deceiving. Pick her, if you ask me. If you know how to use her swing and know her strengths, pick her, if you ask me. Unless you're drafting a team that isn't good. In which, if you're drafting it, then do not pick her if you're picking a team that's bad. Next up, we got Luanne Lui. I think Luanne definitely got a big buff with the lack of with height not mattering as much. Despite having a good coordination stat, in the 97 version, she'd always drop everything. Yet in this version, her coordination stat doesn't mean as much. She's still got blazing speed, good contact, even if it doesn't mean as much, and she still has the good, or at least somewhat decent pitching, although her arm is a bit meh. Sorry about that, but I'd argue that the height change, making it so that shorter players can actually catch, is honestly the game changer here for Luanne, and why I'm probably going to put her from maybe like low B tier to high B tier, almost A tier. So next up we got Maria Luna. Just copy and paste what I said about the backyard base in the 97 tier list. Yes, I do think she's better than Jocinda, by the way. Just copy paste what I said there and just remember what I put on there and just read what I said about Maria. She's pretty much the exact same. Like, her arm is okay, mediocre-ish. She still has her same batting power, and the contact is about the same. Still pretty much the same everything. Just like before, if you put her on a pink team, she becomes a monster, but alone, I still think she's around here. Do I... Yeah, I think she's better than Annie. Do I think that Jocinda's better than Annie, though? Although I think that Ernie's mediocre speed and poor arm also, I think I overrated Ernie, but I think that's a nice rearrangement. Marky Dubois, bottom of D. He went from the bottom of C to the bottom of D because now although his arm is still decent but not impressive, he still has his pitching, but now his bat isn't as good, which heavily implodes on him on the base paths because he's so slow still. I just think other than the pitching and that maybe his arm being somewhat decent or just okay or average-ish, he's just a bad player. I'd argue that he's worse than Kimmy because his arm isn't as good and his bat isn't as good as Kimmy's. So I'd argue that he's just a worse version of Kimmy, with the only redeeming quality being that he's a good pitcher. Although there's definitely better options out there. Like, I'd rather have Kimmy up there, potentially Luanne. I'd also argue for a couple of others that might be coming up. Next up, we got Mikey Thomas. Definitely the bottom of A tier. He definitely got a pretty big buff in this version. His arm stat is 100 out of 100, and it's absolutely incredible in these games. He can also hit bombs, although he can't really do too much else. I think that his ability to hit bombs and to throw 1,000,000 miles per hour is honestly just enough of a redeeming qualities for Mikey. Honestly, like, I definitely think so. The only two drawbacks being horrific stamina and horrific speed. But other than them, he's easily really good. Now, some people may question why I put Luanne here and Mikey up there although, since you guys don't know that my name on Reddit is u/funsmell, I put Luanne on my best team possible instead of Mikey. I just think that Luanne's speed fits the team better, but on average, I do think Mikey is a better player, even though he isn't on the best team. What I think is the best team in the game, and Luanne is, honestly. Okay, next up we got, should I include Mr. Clanky? Yeah, screw it. Mr. Clanky, easy S tier. By far the best pitcher in the game, and it's not even close. And that isn't even talking about the backyard kids. That's just every character in the game. He has an amazing arm. He has the insane ability of infinite stamina, which works amazingly with his 95 at least pitches. And honestly, I just think that he's just easily one of the best. But, okay. Next up we got Pablo Sanchez for the obviously gonna be buff. Obviously at the top, like, he's just absolutely insane in this version. You thought he was good in 97, then watch Pablo in this version, honestly. On top of his arm now being better, because he has like the 70 out of 100 arm, his height isn't as much of a matter, although he still drops quite a lot due to his height, so I actually, over time, I've realized that having Pablo in the outfield is probably the best idea for him, because of how short he is, but he's still the GOAT, as everyone else says. Although I'm pretty sure he did lose some of his pitching. And he actually got his speed stat was decreased, but he actually didn't get slower. What I mean by that is his speed stat in 97 is 95 out of 100, and in 2001 and 2003 it's 85. But with how the speed tiers work, with how, because tier 3 speed, or the third fastest, is 80 to 95, the second fastest is 96 to 99, and the fastest is 100, like I explained in my Fastest Kids video with bunting. So Pablo actually didn't even get any slower, even if his speed stat was decreased. So fun fact for you guys there. So just the same ranking as before, just unbelievably good. Next up we got Pete Wheeler, also insanely good. His pitching was nerfed in this game, which I considered him the best pitcher in the game for the last one. But honestly, it doesn't even matter, because with his speed, I'd never even put him on pitcher anyway, even if I do consider him the best pitcher, because I figured that just his speed was better suited out there. There may be even some regards that debate that Pete is even better than Pablo, but I still think Pablo is better, just for that power bet. Just the speed, the good arm, the good height. Once again, the speed, the good stamina. Oh yeah, and did I mention Pete's speed? Just make him just almost as good as Pablo, and I can see people who think he's better than Pablo, honestly. Okay, so next up we got Reese Worthington, who actually, I used to consider him the worst character in the entire game in the last tier list, but I think that the height buff makes it so that he isn't as bad. His arm is still awful, his batting is still bad, his stamina's also awful, but I just think that height buff just makes him the tad bit better. Because in the 97, even with his amazing contact, freaking coordination ability, he still dropped a lot. But in this version, his glove isn't as bad, and the coordination actually means stuff. And so he isn't that bad there. So I'd argue that he's definitely not as bad as he was on the 97 versions. The 97 versions. But with that, I still think that he's definitely like the lowest possible point on D, but 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 that height buff is definitely just very noticeable with him because now his coordination actually matters. Next up, we got Ricky Johnson. I hate to say it to him, but he stinks in these games. He was poor or mediocre in '97, but my lord, is he bad in these games? Probably the top of F tier. Ricky got both of the ends of the stick that are bad. Imagine just a worse Vicki Kawaguchi with the only things going for him is his height and him having somewhat good speed, essentially. He's just a slightly better version of Gretchen Hasselhoff, but I'd argue a worse version of Reese, basically. Because him and Reese have about the same arm, but they have both about the same glove, even if he is a bit taller. But Reese's hitting is a bit better than his. So yeah. Ricky is definitely just bad. And I hate to say it to him, but because of his low self-esteem, but he just is. As his card says, although you probably can't even read it from here, baseball just isn't his sport. He's just way better at everything else. At every other sport, I assume. Or I've heard that he's good at other sports. So, next up we got Ronny Dobbs, another big impactor of the buff, where everybody with the arm and low contact buff. This is he essentially, although not as big of it as his sister, went from mediocre to above average tier, if you ask me. He's definitely good in this game, or almost good. Although I'd still say his sister is better than him, his arm is actually meaning now, because his 88 out of 100 arm actually means something now, because of the way that the arms were nerfed, so that lower armed kids have poor throws, and now his power bat is also now shines through more. Ronny is definitely, don't sleep on Ronny on these versions on 2001 and 2003 if you ask me. Just don't, cuz he can definitely smash a ball if he gets the right pitch, and he can easily outgun you out on the base paths. And he's even still a good pitcher. So I'd say that Ronny is definitely, although the mediocre speed and the poor gloves still hold him back from going any higher, he definitely got pretty massive upgrades, indirect upgrades, from the '97 version to the 2001 and 2003 versions. I'd argue that he's slightly better than Jorge because of the slightly better bat and power and pitching, honestly. Although I'd still rather win speed. Okay, next up we got Sally Dobbs, the biggest benefiter of literally the entire rework of the stats. Sally Dobbs went from solid to elite, honestly. Sally Dobbs, this may be a questionable pick, but she's just so good at every aspect of the game that I think I just have to put her in an elite tier, or at worst, the top of A tier, honestly. If you know how to use her and get past that 1 out of 100 contact, which considering how contact doesn't mean much in the game, if you get used to her swing, it will. See my videos with hitting with her, like her bombs in that Super Colossal Dome, and I've even hit a few bombs with her in Winter Ball, because 2 out of the 3 hits she had in the first game, or the 3 times she was at bat, were bombs. Sally Dobbs, she can hit with the best of them with the 94 out of 100 power, although the contact isn't great. It doesn't really affect her that much. She can gun you out on first with a cannon of an 80 some out of 100 arm. She's a good pitcher. She has decent speed. She's pretty tall and has a pretty good glove stat, or a decent one to go with it. I just think that I just have to place her up here. I just have to. If you're making a best team possible, I think that Sally is just a must-have with her power bat, cannon of an arm, a good sub-relief pitching abilities, and her reliable glove and height. Honestly, she's just so underrated. There's a reason why on the teams that have her usually go to the World Series in the Backyard Baseball League, or the competitive league, or the Discord. It's because the people that know how to use her bat, her power bat, can usually get her for cheap, because a lot of the coaches don't like to deal with the 1 out of 100 power bat, or contact bat. But if you know how to use it, you can get her for cheap without giving up much, which is just insane. And there's a reason why she has the most World Series appearances, from what I've heard. I'm pretty sure she has, anyway. And there's actually a reason why, as I explained in my Reddit post, I think she's just better than Achmed. Because she can power hit like him, and she can pretty much do everything else he can. Or she can, but better. She's just so good. If you know how to use her, just go and get some batting practice done with her, and get some batting practice so you can reliably hit well with her and pick her, if you ask me. Just so good and so underrated, okay. Sidney Webber, exact same position as her sister. Man, that tier is getting lengthy. I might have to move some people. Stephanie definitely got big nerfs in the changes. She went from like solid to mediocre, honestly. I think I'll put her at like the bottom of C tier. She's honestly she still has like the somewhat decent arm and the pretty reliable glove and the good contact, but her stamina is still poor, and her bat is pretty weak still. I think she's just a slightly better version of the Webber sisters without each other, which is why I'll put her at like the bottom of C, honestly. Although, would I rather have her than Angela? God, I'm second guessing myself now. Would I rather the pitching and the bat, or the speed and the fielding? I'd rather the speed and the fielding. So Angie, you're going down a slot. Next up, we got Tony Delvecchio. Unpopular opinion, he's better than his sister. I think I'll put him here. I don't think he's as good as Ronny in these versions, but he's still very solid. You know, once again, that 100 out of 100 arm is just crucial in this game, because he can gun him down like he could in the 97, or better than in the 97 version, because it actually matters more here. And on top of that, he still has his good bat, but other than those two things, he still isn't that great outside of them. But I think that his good bats and his cannon of an arm, honestly, just make him still pretty solid. Okay, but would I rather Jorge's stamina and better bat than his arm? That's a doozy. I think I'll keep it like it is right now, though. Although he's definitely not as good as Ronny and Luanne. I will say that, though. And I definitely would rather him than Paste. Next up, we got Vicki Kawaguchi. Just low B tier. Just extremely solid. Or not, just pretty solid, if you ask me. Once again, just like Reese, she got the height buff, because before she used to drop quite a bit, even with the perfect coordination stat. But now, she doesn't really do that anymore. Well, she can still drop it if it's a high player throwing it to her, or a tall player throwing it to her, but it's way less common now, so you can actually more reliably catch with her. And on top of that, although you could probably barely notice it, and it's kind of weird because she still has the 1 out of 10 at hitting, but her batting was actually buffed in this version for whatever reason. They gave her a 25 out of 100 power and a 25 out of 100 contact. Her 97 stats were her 1997 stats were as followed. Her 1997 stats were 1 out of 100 power and 15 out of 100 contact. So she got a batting buff for whatever reason. Like, you can barely notice a difference, so I don't really get why they do that. But I mean, it does slightly help her because she can actually hit it farther than just a few feet now. So, but with that, I'd say that would I rather her or Dimitri? Yeah, I'd rather her than his way better bat. It's just the speed and the fielding and the stamina. Would I rather her than Jorge, the speed and the slightly better glove? No. Do I have anybody? No, I don't think I missed anybody. So, is this how this is gonna go? Is this the list? Okay, so I'm gonna review the list and see if there's anything I need changing. That needs changing, honestly. I honestly. Okay. I'm gonna look at this tier over here, and because this might be the one that gets the most changes. Because would I rather Ernie or Jocinda? Jocinda has about the same glove, or a slightly less reliable glove, but way more contact, but slightly worse batting, but stamina. Yeah, I think I'll still stick with that decision because of the pitching and the slightly more reliable glove. Would I rather her or Stephanie, though? Slightly better power, but in contact, but worse speed, but slightly better arm, and about the same. Yeah, definitely. Would I rather Kenny or the Webber sisters? Okay, better pitcher, sure, worse bat, worse. Nah. Would I rather Maria or Annie? Okay, better stamina versus better bat or contact bat, but more power. Roughly the same arm, same. Think she has better coordination or fielding? Nah, yeah. Would I rather Luanne or Ronny? For Ronny is better cannon of an arm, or Luann's better speed and slightly better pitching, I'd argue. Oh, and Ronnie's better hitting. I think I'd still rather Slan's speed, slightly better glove, and pitching. I think that's about finalized with the pros down here. Once again, if I need to do the pros, if you guys want me to, I can do the pros in another video. Except I'll probably do the 2003 pros because I'm more familiar with them. Oh, and by the way, if you guys want to check it out, I'll link the 1997 tier list I did in the comments. But with that said, I think I'm gonna leave it off here. I think this list right here is pretty finalized. I think this is my 2001 and 2003 Backyard Kid tier list. Write down in the comments what you disagree with, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And I respect the opinions of the people who disagree. I'll see you guys later.